You're listening to She's the Business podcast.
How do you create connection through your content? Isn't it so frustrating when you put all that time and effort into creating what you think is great content and then it fails to make any connection or impression on your audience at all? Well, creating connection through your brand is probably the number one way that you can differentiate yourself and stand apart from others in the market and actually connect with people on that deeper level that builds the trust that brings you the clients that are right for you. And if that sounds like something that you're missing from your business, how to go from creating run-of-the-mill content that's same, but different to what everybody else is putting out there, to being seen for the big-hearted person that you and creating that deep connection with your audience, then you're going to absolutely love today's episode. So please stay tuned. It's coming right up.
Hi, I'm your host, Jessica Osborne, and in my 23 years of business and marketing, I've built many brands to become multi-billion-dollar companies. And just in the last 10 years, I've built 2 online businesses of my own from my dining room table with 2 little babies running around at my feet. I've made it my mission to inspire you to get out of your own way and become the successful business owner who's living the lifestyle you really desire without all the hustle. This is She's the Business podcast, made by women for women. This is your weekly dose of motivation and inspiration.
Bringing us this amazing conversation today, all about the true connection in branding, is my very special guest, Martiene van Steyn, who is the founder of Big Hearted Digital, Branding in a Box, and the Social Startup, which is a program for people wanting to get started in social. Now, Martiene is well known in the fitness industry for her marketing expertise, her amazing branding brain that seems to pull together all these different threads of a brand and come out of it with a powerful, impactful brand identity that creates a connection far beyond what we see in the usual style of branding, which is quite surface level. We go far, far deeper. And in today's episode, you are going to be very lucky to hear more about what her brand 360-degree experience is like, what that means. Her 2-minute, 2-day, 2-month format for creating a long-lasting client relationships, which means, of course, that you can spend less time marketing and selling, really leverage that effort that you're putting in to making lasting connections with your audience and clients. And finally, her 4-part brand hologram, which is the essence of how you create this unique identity and persona and connection for your brand, which brings you the right clients. Now, Martiene is a business coach, a marketing mastermind, and storyteller extraordinaire. So I know that you're going to gain so much value from this conversation. We touch on all things to do with branding and how you really draw out your values for your business to create a meaningful brand that really showcases the big-hearted person that you are so that people can connect with you on that deep, deep layer. Now, without further ado, let me play this interview for you. Okay, and I'm here right now with the lovely Martiene van Steyn. Thank you so much for joining me, Martiene, all the way from Peru, which is a very interesting story that, I'd love you to share a little bit about why you're in such an exotic, amazing place as well. Thank you for joining me. And could you give us a quick intro into, I guess, who you are and what you do?
I love that. Thank you so much, Jess, for inviting me and to connecting. And, I love this, that we get this opportunity to collaborate and to meet amazing people doing amazing things, even from Peru, which is so damn cool. So it's an interesting thing. Yes, that's a great story. We can talk about Peru in a bit. I suppose how I got here is I'd spent, it feels like it's probably like 14 years in the health and wellness industry. I was known as being quite I was quite well known in that space, and I was asked to put together a new concept in Australia. So I came to the US, I put together a series of strategies and a series of concepts that came and we launched in Australia. And one of the things that we did was we hired this PR firm to do a number of things. And I realized that when we had all these external people doing our marketing for us, it didn't really work. And so I fell into creating digital marketing and marketing funnels from customer experience and from a sales background. So, I was a person who could, make sales when businesses were closed. I was a person who could get leads when the market was saturated. And so it just became a natural progression for me to start to find pathways and find pipelines that helped people build their business. So who is Martiene? Such a big question. So I would say I'm here to help facilitate great customer experiences that lead to helping people build a connected and aligned business that feels joyful for them.
Yeah,
that's who I am.
That's amazing. It's a really big picture vision there. I think, we're talking, the real driver and passion behind business. And what does big hearted really mean? That's actually the name of your business, isn't it? Big Hearted Digital. So what does it mean to you when we're saying a business is big hearted?
Yeah. And again, this is backstory stuff, because I never wanted to be a marketer. I never wanted to be that person that was, doing all the things. And I also have always been quite mindful of how we show up in the world. And so I've struggled with finding purpose and meaning to the work that I do as a marketer. I run Facebook ads, we do branding, we do social strategy, and all of those things can feel very disconnected and very contrived and very manufactured and very filtered. And so one of the things for me was how do I take this thing, which has such a great opportunity for people to really change their lives? And then I realized, actually, the way to show up is to build connection. Connection is my highest value. And that when we speak from the heart and try and let go of everything that's in our heads, which is hard as humans, then we're able to build a heartfelt connection. And so everything for me was about how do we speak from the heart? And, it's always about how do we allow ourselves to show up as the big-hearted humans that we are? Because no one that I've met started a business to dominate the world. There are those, right?
No,
most people,
sure most of us not, but there might be a couple of people.
Yeah, there's a few, right? The guy who built Bridgestone tires, maybe he's got a passion for tires. I don't know. Most of us are here because we want to do some good. And so then it was how do I make sense from this? It's how about I work with people who lead with their heart? Because we speak the same language. I'm esoteric. For me, working with people is completely subjective, which is hard, because if I don't feel you, if I don't connect with you, if I don't feel the heart and soul of who you are and what you do, then I can't tell your story. And so it's for me, it's intuitive and it's sensory, and it comes from a place that's from deep inside. So it's big-hearted.
Yes, there is so much in just what you said there. We're going to need to unpack this on a greater level. One of the things, firstly, was about how branding can feel very clinical, and I guess marketing as well. And going back to my days in corporate, it was certainly how some businesses felt. It was very restricted by rules, and everything was measured, and it was extremely clinical. There was literally no lifeblood in the brand at all, no personality. And, that may have worked back in the day, but I think that we've all moved so far, haven't we? And so a brand now is not less about the rules around it and what it has, and maybe more about what you're saying, the connection, the ability to connect to someone. And so I guess that brings me to the question, what do you see as the difference between the storytelling brand now, branding with storytelling, versus marketing? If we can try to differentiate that, I guess they all intertwine, and we probably all have different perceptions what those words mean. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I think branding and marketing go hand in hand, right? So I see branding and branding is not a fluffy logo. It's not like a pattern. It's not your social media feed. Your brand is a 360-degree experience of you. It's how do you help people to feel? How do people see you? How do they hear you? What is your tone? What is the experience that you leave them with that gets them to go, I get it, or I get you, or they get me. So the brand is this 360-degree experience. And that's one piece of it, right? And so I think we need to have a brand that is kinesthetic, that is creative, that is auditory, that touches all the senses so people can get an essence of who we are. And through that essence, then we're able to funnel that marketing term into the tool, the mechanism, which is marketing, that helps us showcase that brand. So for me, brand is like who we are and how we see it and how we tell our story. And the marketing are the channels and the tools that help us to amplify it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to look at what that means and where brands, because marketing's such a strange term, isn't it? Like, as a marketer, there's, you say marketing and some people think of, well, that's brochures and ads, or, that's sticking a logo on things, and other people see it as the big high level strategy. And I'm like, well, it's kind of a bit of all of that, and brand sits somewhere in the middle. And like you say, it is kind of really the heart center. Like, that is, the brand is the heart. It is who you are, your identity, and you need that. And it's, part of this formal marketing strategy. And then there's all those marketing tactics and mechanisms that help to get it out there. So that is a really great description. And you mentioned and touched on something there that has been one of my passion areas, I suppose, for quite some time. And that's about customer experience, and how your brand, which is not your logo, but your actual, the vibe, like the heart pulse of your business, like how did that actually create a customer experience? And I guess people might be wondering, well, why is customer experience relevant here, when what we're generally looking at with marketing and branding is the front end of we're trying to bring new customers in. So how is that even relevant to customer experience? And I have my views on it, but I'd love to hear yours first, because I don't want to put words in your mouth.
You can. I think there's a space where a little while ago, without giving away ages, people only needed to see things a couple of times for them to make a decision. Now people need to see things, they need to hear us, they need to have like a lot more interactions with us before they can make a difference. And so when we think about how people start to work with us, and particularly in that exchange, first of all, they pay with their attention. We capture their attention. That's the energy exchange. We show up and we capture the attention. So they're paying us with their attention. And then as they get to know us, then the exchange is time. They start to give us more time. And so I think that is part of that process. And then, then they pay us with money, which we love, right? And so that is part of the journey, is like, very rarely does someone pay with money before they've given you any time or attention. And so it's about, how do we take someone, and I hate the word funnel, but I've succumbed to it because everyone knows it, but I love to see it as a pipeline. Like, how do we take someone along the pipeline from, okay, here's the value exchange. Time is precious. Attention is precious. Money is precious. They're all valuable commodities. But we need to bring people down that pipeline so that we can get to the place where they're like, yes, I get where you are. And so that for us, and no one is excluded from that, right? It doesn't matter what part of the business we're in, we still have that energy exchange, whether it's a short period or a long period.
Yes.
It doesn't really matter, but there's still the exchange. And that for me is the customer journey. And I always say it's the moments of connection that allow someone to really be able to make a decision. So every time they see you or interact with you, how do you create a moment where each connected point is a value-driven moment where people feel seen and heard, from how you answer the phone to how you send an email to how you show up, on a Zoom call, to all of those things where people feel seen and heard. And that's the journey. It's those touch points, those moments where people have an opportunity to get to know who you are and build the relationship.
Yeah, I love how you explain that then. And, you're completely aligned with how I also think about the experience. And, where I see some people talking customer experience, they're really all focused on once someone's become a customer, and they're focused on all of their processes and things that are happening in the business, on how they serve them. And I'd always say, well, guys, the experience starts from the very first touch point, like way before they become a customer, because that's actually what helps them to decide, like you said, is like they make a decision after they've got that connection, and we're mentioning connections with time. They give us their time before then they're going to give us the money. So the experience for me, it was something I was like, well, is it a customer experience? And it is, if we're talking like we want them to become a customer, but it starts way back at the beginning. So you could even call it like the brand experience. It's like the experience they're having with your brand from the first minute all the way through, and including when they decide to leave, which is funny, but it's like you can make the leaving experience a good one, or you could make it not so good. And what's the likelihood of them coming back if it's not a great experience to leave? So I really love how you explain that as that full journey and all the touch points, and how could you add value to those touch points? Do you have an example that comes to mind of a touch point where you've been able to turn that interaction into something that's quite powerful and has value, that you could, really align it with your brand?
Yeah, there's so many things in what you just said, right, that I'm like, oh, I want to unpack those things.
Okay, go for it.
But I'll come back to no. And I think there's another piece in that, right? So, our customer experience is a customer journey. And sometimes people think the customer journey is the end piece. But actually, how do we take someone who has already become a customer and advance them into the next step? So how do we create follow-up processes that support our customers to extend the relationship? And, the greatest customer journeys are the ones that last a long time. And most of my customers, they stay with me for years. Like my customer journey, once I found that, the people that I'm here to serve, they stay with me for a long time, because everything that we do is a progression together. And so it's like, yes, we attract people. How do we then accept them into the business? How do we bring them into our process and consider how do we connect, and what does that look like, and how do they feel through the experience, and then how do we deepen the connection to amplify what they're doing, and then take them into that sort of follow-up space. So I think that's super cool, because that just allows us to lengthen that customer journey and that customer experience, and then it loops around to the next one. So it's this beautiful cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I got sidetracked on that one, but what was the question?
I was just thinking, you and I are probably imagining the touch points and really getting that. And I was thinking, for our listeners, could we have an example of one maybe that's coming to mind for you, where it's like, oh, that was a really great touch point experience that we added in to amplify the overall customer experience and really create that value?
Super easy. So one thing that we have done with our clients, and which I've done, so I did a full 30-day immersion in a business accelerator back in 2014 before I started this business. And I was working with a very large corporate fitness chain, right? So everyone knows that in Australia, it's fitness first. It's not the same anymore, but it was then. Fitness first was known as being like it's a sales machine, right? And I had amazing teams. And I was known as someone who could take any club and turn it around. And if you consider we're selling 100, 200, 300 memberships every single month in, month out, on the first of the month, it goes back to zero, you start again, right? So, but the churn rate was super high in those environments. So when you're working in big corporate, so people think, well, what can I do? I'm in big corporate, I'm hamstrung by the rules. And so the simplest thing that we did was we changed the way that we answered the phone. So most people in corporate, or most people in businesses, they answer the phone. It's like, hello, you're speaking to Martiene, how can I help you? But what we did was we changed the experience of answering the phone to make it a deeper connection. So the way that our team answered the phone was like, good afternoon. Thank you for calling Fitness First. My name is Martiene. Can I start with your name, please? And it was like such a simple thing to switch with people and be like, oh, yeah, I'm Jess. And off they would go. And it was such a simple thing about how do we answer a phone in a way that builds connection rather than that's robotic everyday thing that we do, simply by saying, can I start with your name and how can we help you?
Yes. Take it from feeling clinical and like a business conversation to it actually being two humans talking together, like so simple and so powerful. That's amazing. And, something you mentioned there, the churn rate being really high. Well, like that is exactly the reason why you're doing this, right? Because, you can always be looking at sales. But if the sales are going really well and then the churn is high, that's like, well, we're taking the gloss off the sales figures really, because you're doing all this work to get the customers there. And if the experience isn't living up to their expectations, if it's not what they're wanting, they're leaving. That's so much upfront energy and effort and money, time, energy, everything that's going into bringing new people in, that actually could be leveraged so much higher when we're looking at the entire experience all the way through. And I think that that's the important piece. Is it's not about just going, oh, I'm going to have really great processes in the background. It's like, no, what is the experience that we want them to have, and how are we showing them before they become a customer what it's going to be like, so that when they are a customer, it's meeting their expectations. Like, it's not suddenly like, oh, well, this was all lovely in the before I've become a customer and I've really enjoyed this whole experience, and now that I'm a customer it's all changed and it's not what I was expecting at all. Well, that's a massive indicator, isn't it, for having a high churn rate, because the experience would be totally disconnected there, and I was just thinking it's such a simple yet powerful thing to be thinking about and looking at. And I guess the reason why it's so important to have this, isn't it? Because less money on marketing and sales means higher lifetime value. And, your clients staying with you for years, clearly they're getting the experience that they expected and more. You're probably exceeding their expectations, I'd imagine.
And there's a thing on that too around, when we bring people into a business, it's much easier to keep a client than it is to get a new one. It's much cheaper to keep a client than to get a new one. It's much easier to serve a client than to try and find a client. And so if we think about that and that integration, because there's stages, right? So what are we doing to attract someone? What are we doing to integrate them? And the old school days was like, what are you saying in the first 2 minutes? What are you saying in the first 2 weeks? What are you saying in the first 2 months? And if you haven't got that connection, 2 minutes, 2 weeks, 2 months, actually it's 2 minutes, 2 days, 2 months, then you've got a high chance of them not wanting to spend time with you. And I think that's a piece too, that integration in that first, from when they say yes, it should be like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever, getting really excited to then integrate them as quickly and as seamlessly as you can, because that's going to be the thing that determines how that looks. And for example, and this too, when I was in Australia, I had clients on the Sunshine Coast, but I was living in Byron, and I would drive to them on the Sunshine Coast to meet them when I'm in Australia. And that's like a full day round trip. Now, I could do that in Zoom, but it's not going to build connection, and it's not going to, and they appreciate it. Like, oh my God, thanks for coming up here. Clients love you.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's, I love that, because you probably surprised them. They weren't expecting that. They're like, we've just signed up with you. And then you're like, yep, here I am. I'm coming to meet you and say thank you. What a memorable experience. And that's a great example of you exceeding their expectations, living up to even more than, I guess, what they felt they were getting when they were signing up with you. And that just creates so much connection and loyalty. So I love this. Now, you mentioned before, connection is your highest value. So tell me about connection more. What can having a brand that is creating connection, how can that change things for you? What does it mean? How do we know whether we've got connection or not?
There's so many questions all at once. Well, I think that creating a connection is the doorway to enterprise. Creating connections and building relationships is the doorway to sales and enterprise. So we can talk about that on a mental space. But if you bring it back to the heart, people want to do business with people that get them. They want to do business with people who understand who they are and what they do. And we know this, right? I always have thought that, how do we change the frequency of marketing so that people feel empowered to show up as the beautiful humans that they are? And so when we're showing up from a place of purpose and passion and value and connection, and we're not trying to figure out, again, I know this, our offers, our marketings, our sales mechanisms, when we're trying to figure that out, but when we're leading from our heart and from our passion and we're leading from connection, the energy and the joy that sits behind that is so impactful for the people who are in our field. And so I believe that creating connection is really the secret to building relationships and then obviously building a business. And it's also the most joyful way that we can do it. Like, I'd much rather be building connections than building funnels.
That just made so much sense to me then. I was like, instead of it feeling like a transaction, you're here and this is a business transaction, it's like, no, I'm actually choosing to do business here with somebody because they get me, because this feels great, this is a good fit. And not that we want to be best friends forever or something like that, but it's actually like, no, I really connect with this person and like them. And business, I guess some people might think, well, what if it's more than one person? It's like, well, right now, if you're the person in the business that they're talking to, that business is fronted by you. You are the one that's creating that connection to the brand. So that's, I guess, a whole nother conversation for another day. But I love that, because for me, when you were saying that, it was like, oh, that's the real difference, isn't it? And I've been in both places. I've felt what it's like when it feels like a transaction, when it's very kind of, okay, well, this is what it's going to be. And, people are kind of like on the lookout for like, well, what's the catch here? And what are we negotiating? And all of that stuff. It's like, wow, we don't even need to be in that space. We can be in a space where it's feeling like, is this a great fit? Do I like it? Does this fit for me? And, obviously my budget, how does that work? Yeah, great, let's just do it. And what a different feeling that I'm getting from just imagining those two scenarios.
They're polar opposite, right? They're polar opposite, because then when we like our customers and we like what we do, and when we're invested in them and we feel like, when I work with someone and I love what you do. And most of the people that I work with are in some sort of health, well-being, mindful space. It could be as a business coach, a life coach. It could be as a gym, a pottery studio. Like, there's a bunch of people that I work with. But there's always an emotional connection for me to what they do. Right. It's a huge, I invest in that. I had a girl, she's a fashion store. And so she's like, oh my God, how did you take what we do and then bring that to life and make it so personal? So when you're speaking to us, and now she feels connected because she feels seen and heard and valued, right? And I think that's the piece. If we want to tell someone's story, which I do, this for me is all about storytelling. It's not marketing. It's like, for me, all I want to do is tell great stories that allow people to really see who they are in a fresh light, because we don't know our greatness. Like, I'm full of the Martiene stuff, right? And the Martiene stuff is not always amazing. And so sometimes, someone will say something. It's like, I really love when you did that. And I'm like, what did I do? And so that's how it is for my clients. I can see what the uniqueness is, and I'm able to shine a light in that in a way that's like, it's so joyful for me to be able to say, this is how I see you, and this is how you show up, and this is how I want to showcase you to the world. This is how I want to tell your story. And when we go through that process, we create the content and we create the shoots and we create the branding and we build these pieces, and then they see themselves the way that I see them and the way that I see that they can shine in the world. It like lifts their confidence and it lifts their energy, and everything shifts. Everything changes just because someone shone a light on their truth and their hearts and their greatness and saw more in them than what they saw in themselves. And that's big-hearted.
Amazing. I love that. I was going to ask, what do you think are the components? We're going to sound very technical and machinery-like for a moment, but what are the components that you need for a brand that does create that uniqueness, but that connection and actually being able to tell a story? Because I guess people might be like, well, this is what I'm about, but I see other people out there kind of saying the same thing. Like, how am I going to look different? How am I going to be different? As you and I know, we're all unique. We're all different. So there is a different bone in there somewhere, but how do you break that down? What are the pieces that you look at in order to create a connected, authentic brand?
We're all snowflakes.
Of course we are.
So that's such a great thing. And it's a really great question. Like, I work in the space of, content and marketing and branding, and there are hundreds of people in this space. This is not a unique space, right? This is a flooded, bloody red sea of people, right?
Yeah.
And so the same in health and fitness. Like, how many wellness coaches are out there? How many personal trainers are out there? So it's not enough to say I'm a personal trainer or I'm a marketer or I'm a health coach, or I'm a business coach, because we're a dime a dozen. So it's like, well, how do we then, what I call, create our brand hologram? And the hologram is like, how do we create our lens, which then facilitates the content pillars, which then facilitates how we show up in the world? And so, it's, yes, you do fitness, but how is it about the way you do fitness that's totally uniquely you? Yes, you do marketing. How is it that you do marketing that's totally uniquely you, and it's so right for the right person? Gary Vee, social media. Yeah, everyone does social media. I could rattle off a gazillion social media experts right now. It's a crowded marketplace, but Gary Vee, his hologram is his family. He's family driven. Everything about it is about family. He's the real human. It's an immigrant family. He's a real human. He's very grounded. He's very down to earth. He loves creating opportunities for people. And all of those things build the hologram for Gary Vee and Vaynerchuk Media. It's not just, hey, Gary just swears online and he's out there in the world. He's bringing the Garyness, he's bringing the Gaz to the marketing. And so that's the same for all of us. What is
the swearing's not who he is, right? It's just the way that he chooses to communicate, which is fine. Some like it, some don't, but it's not who he is.
For all of us, the hologram is, how do we showcase the thing that we do that's unique to us? And it's generally 4 pieces of a hologram. So for Martiene, it's big-hearted, it's Indigenous, it's remote, and it's connection. They're like layers within what I do that makes the way that Martiene does content and marketing truly me, in a way that there's probably not that many people doing it in that flavor, even though there's a gazillion people doing it out of the world.
Yeah. Oh, that's so powerful. I love that. You did mention just now remote. So it might be a good time to talk about you being in Peru and how this came about. We teased it at the start of the episode. So tell us about what the remoteness in your Martiene hologram, how you do business, social branding. What does remote mean, and how have you brought that to life?
So I've just started a program called Remote Year, where I get to live and work in 12 countries over 12 months. And when I left working in bricks and mortar businesses and I started, marketing and branding and doing these things, I always wanted to be able to be self-determining. I always wanted to, I feel like freedom is a little overused at times, but I wanted to be the driver of my own reality. I didn't want to succumb to other people's values, rules, expectations of who I am or who I should be. And so I really wanted to be the driver of what this looks like for me. And so I was living in Bali for a little while and flying back to Brisbane. And then I was traveling in Europe, and then I came home for Christmas, and I was in Australia just these past 6 months, and the housing market is just so terrible, and I've been living and working remotely for 3-4 years, and I'm like, well, this is just an opportunity. So I think the thing about being remote is that we have, and this is my empowerment piece, we all have an opportunity to live our lives by our own design. We all have the opportunity to co-create how we show up in our business. And my business facilitates this for me. Now, there are things that are challenging, it's 9 p.m. here in Peru, right? And so there's timing and whatever else. And there are things that we compromise on, but it means that I get to do things my way. And I really value that. And so if that can be empowering for others, then it doesn't matter. You don't need to have a big corporate and, gazillions of people behind you. And you can actually live and work remotely very simply if that's what excites you. I think that's really why I do this. And, I don't have kids and I don't have a partner, so it's a much easier decision for me, but it's still easy. And we have a friend who's traveling right now with her husband and 2 kids. And so it's possible for anyone to build a business that actually allows you to facilitate a lifestyle the way that you want to.
Yeah, I love that. And I guess, so you've got this sort of value around creating your own rules for your life and how your business can facilitate it. And, what was coming up for me when you were saying that was you're even demonstrating how you can still be connected and have a connected brand, even though you're not physically in the same location as someone you're kind of showcasing that by having this full year of 12 countries in 12 months. Can't wait to follow your journey, which is so incredibly exciting. And if someone's sitting there thinking, oh, I love the idea of that, like how do you encompass and incorporate your values, like your core values of you as a human into your business? And would you say that that's part of how you create your hologram? Like what's kind of setting you apart and making you unique is being able to connect your values into your business.
I think that there's like probably a couple of steps for that. First, like identify your values, know what's important, know what it is that's purposeful and meaningful for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then and it's an interesting thing because I always joke that it's not your why, it's your who. Because once you know what's important for you, then it's about who are we when we're showing up in the world, being of value, and who are we here to be of value to? And I think that's the next piece, because people will connect with you based on how you make them feel. People will buy based on how you make them feel. And people want to do business with people who understand them. So the value piece is like, if traveling and working remotely is exciting to you, then you're probably going to value that. I value that freedom and that way of being. But if stability and consistency and, building something that's very grounded and based on location is your highest value. And a perfect example of this for me is I have a family member who doesn't value the way that I live and work. And so for them, they think that I'm irresponsible. They're like, you have no responsibilities, you have no cares, you just do whatever you want. And I'm like, I still have responsibilities, I just do it differently.
Yes.
But for people who don't value this, whose values are stability, security, and like putting your kids through the same school for the whole 12, and if you have 3 kids, that's 20 years in one spot and I can't move, that's a decision. But that's the highest value, is that stability and security and consistency. So that's how we show up. So if you're that person, you're probably not going to be wanting to follow me because you think I'm a Fruit Loop.
Exactly. No, I wasn't thinking that you're a Fruit Loop, but I was thinking, I've said exactly. But I meant that who you are, when you really lean into those values, you're creating this energy and vibe and connection with people who also value those things. And that's why it's such a deeper connection, isn't it? Because I think one of the biggest lessons or pieces of advice we probably give to our clients, I'm sure you have the same conversations that I do, is you're not there for everybody. You don't have to be liked by everybody. You don't need every single person who needs you or needs your service to buy from you, because they're not all going to be the right fit for you. And like you were just explaining, like if you had clients who really they valued other things, that they might value strict rules and being in a box and having stability and things not changing, they may not feel like this is a great relationship, because you might be really pushing the boundaries and trying to get them out of the box because you can see the value of being outside the box, whereas they're seeing the value of being in the box. And so that relationship and that connection just isn't really going to work. Oh, I love that. So do you have more steps that you would go through in order to create that sort of meaningful business that encompasses your values?
Well, I think, one of the simplest things is, and this is a great tool for anyone who's wondering, well, how do I show up, or what would I share? Because this is where we get stuck. We get stuck in I don't know what to post online. Like, I don't know what to do. They're doing that. They're doing that. This person's doing this. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And so we get in our heads about how do we actually create content that connects. So the step one is like, there are billions of values exercises. Go ahead and just really try to identify what are those top few things. And then number 2 is, who is your human? And I think if we, again, come down to that soul connection, all we really have is this moment. And when we live in this moment, we get another moment. Most people, when they get started in business, they're like, I want to get 10,000 followers, or I want to, sell 10,000 memberships at like $8 a membership, or whatever this thing is. And they're so busy thinking about the $10,000, the 8,000 memberships, that they forgot that you actually have to start with one.
Yeah.
And when we have one, then we get another one. And when we're present to that one, then we might get 10. And when we have 10, then we might get 100. And so if you can't get one, then you're not going to get 10,000.
Very true.
Often in that, we're like, oh, but I want to do this, and this is my why, and this is what I'm driven to do. And I get that. But without a customer, you don't have a business. You only have an idea. And so sometimes around that, the easiest thing to do is to go and speak to your people. Go and find 10 people and ask them a very simple question. If I was with you for an hour and I was to deliver a workshop or a tour or share with you something, what would you want to hear from me? And then if you speak to 10 people, you'll get like how they see you, but you'll also see a different perspective of how you show up in the world. And that becomes then like an easy way to understand, well, that's what I would do. I'd want to hear, I want to hear this from you. I'd want to hear that from you. And that's really empowering for most people who get stuck about, well, how do I bring my values to life? Go and ask some people. And then from there, you can create your content, right? You can create a content map of how that shows up in the world, because you know, one, what you love to do, and two, what people are loving from you. And then that's the sweet spot in the middle.
Oh, absolutely. I love that question. I was like, wow, that's so simple and so powerful. I was just sitting immersed in it for a minute thinking, what a great way to really get an understanding, I guess, of how other people see you and what they value and what they find a connection with in terms of who you are and what you talk about. Now, you mentioned a lot of people, you struggle with, well, what do I say, and we can easily get sucked into that rabbit hole of comparison and looking at what everybody else is talking about. And then, maybe even parroting stuff that we've heard that we like, which then blends into the background and you become a bit of wallpaper looking like the same as everybody else. So I guess the hurdle is, right, so I've got these values that are me. Then what do I do with that? Like, how do I actually create some content? Do I go out and talk about them, or do you talk with them? Like, what is it? How do you sort of turn that identity of who you are and what you're about into actual content that connects?
So your values become some of those brand pillars, and then the content that connects are like the tactics for sharing them. An easy way to do this is to create a grid, right? And down one side, pop all your values: connection, family, freedom, whatever those things are. And then maybe pop the same like volume. So if you've got 5 down one side, 5 at the top, of things at the top. And up the top, it could be why, a quote, inspiration, about, or an insight. So you've got your values down the side, and you've got the questions at the top: why, about, insight, about me, and a quote, right? So if your first value is connection, then why connection, or add something around that. So why is connection important to me? Because connection for me is what we're all here for. It's energy, right? And the next thing could be a quote. So I could run a quote that's about connection in some way, shape, or form. Could be insight. For me, the insight is connection is the doorway to enterprise. And then the next piece could be motivation. Like, I believe that we thrive in community. My motivation is about building community and facilitating change. And then the next one could be, I can't remember what I said, but you get the idea. So you just run like these things are along a grid, and then just plot it out so that you've got like a really easy way to see what behind the scenes could be another one. So if connection is my value, behind the scenes could be like, how do you connect? Are you having a meal with someone, celebrating something? Are you connecting with yourself? Do you connect with a higher power? Like, what is connection for you? And then those are the ways that you can showcase. So it's not singular, it's sort of multifaceted. So you can mind map it the same way, drop it in and then mind map all the ways that you can talk about connection, same sort of way.
Yeah, I love that. And something that I noticed you doing there is, even though you were talking about connection and why, that was all tying back into, I guess, your business. So it was all relevant. You're talking about, well, connection's important and here's why, but it was still relevant to your business as well. So we're not just creating random content and sharing all sorts of random disconnected stuff that's going on in our lives that are talking about our values, because that's really not then helping someone get to know you in the way that you want to for your business. Would that be right? Yeah.
And, it's interesting because I have a lot of people say, well, I do this and I do that. And I'm like, that's great. But does that lead people into making a decision to work with you? Do you know? And it's like, but, that's who I used to be. I'm like, great, but that's not relevant to what people are doing now. And so I spend a lot of time trying to talk people off the shelf. It's like, well, people want to know that. I'm like, do they? Because it's not necessarily, and I don't want to lay my heart and soul online in all those spaces, but I'm willing to show up and let people see, like every day I pull a miracle card, right? And I do that as a piece of, this is what's happening for me today. And I post the question, this is a question, and this is the answer, whatever that is, right? It's a behind the scenes Martiene moment that I practice every day, whatever that is. So.
Yeah, and it's so great. I think, just getting that flavor of you and how much of you to share, and what gives people that insight and that feeling like they know you and you're approachable and you've made that deeper connection. It's not like I'm just talking business. You're sharing stuff that's about you, but then there's still that purpose behind it, right? There's a reason why you're sharing that, and there's a reason to, still create that connection into you and your business and why that's happening. And that, yes, sharing your card in the morning may not be about, hey, I do branding and social media, but at the same time, it still is, because that's part of you as your brand and who you are, the presence that you are as a human being, and why they might like you and choose to work with you. So there's sort of subliminal messaging and all of that. And I guess something else that you mentioned before about the photos, I was like, and showing that photo of connection is actually helping to drive that message even without the words, right? Because you're using imagery that's showing your value as well. So there's so many ways that you could do that. It's quite exciting.
Images are so important. So and again, this is my brand content brain, like mind mapping out. But when people show up online, they're like, oh, but the pictures of me are the ones that have do the most. I'm like, and that's great, right? And I think you can do that, right? But there are three kinds of images that we share. We share our profile images. They're our human images. They're the ones that we're happy with and we want people to see. It's how people remember us. And then we have our situational images. Our situational images are us doing life. It's us doing work, doing life, like us in the scenario that is what's going on. If you're a surfer, it's you in the surf. If you're a mother, it's you with your kids, like whatever that thing is. And then the third layer of imagery is what we call foundational images. And the foundational images are images that are not necessarily of us, but they're images that actually are the building blocks of the brand and the story. So things like the cards, things like the quote tiles, things like if you're a coffee person and you do your coffee every day, or things like the ocean, if ocean is your thing. Those are the things that they build affinity and they anchor the story that you're telling. Because if you're just there saying blah blah blah, this is me, this is me, this is me, this is one thing, but then all of those other layers add breadth and depth to the story. And so people are saying, oh yeah, actually that is her, she's not just spinning the thing, right? She actually is, that's what she means. And so I think having that diversity is important.
Yes, and they all tie together as well, because it's not like you're just showing that photo on one day and then that's it and done. It's like so for me, when you were saying that, I was like, well, I always talk about having a balanced lifestyle, and we're in business because we want the lifestyle. And so I post photos that I've taken out on my walk and the beach and on the path. I'm not in them, but I've taken them, and it's they're actual just photos of where I am right now. And it's like, but when you do that consistently, that creates that message, doesn't it? Like that's kind of part of what I believe and what I value and what I'm about. And so I love that, because I'm thinking, we sometimes get so focused on the minute detail, like this particular one. It's like, well, each one is just helping to build the bigger picture and build that all those fibers together to create that overall brand perspective.
They're weaving the story.
Love it.
Weaving the story. I love it too.
Yes. Amazing. Now, I've got one more question for you, because I thought, I'm interested to know what the answer is as well. So is there anything that you say to your clients, please don't do that? Like a big no-no, a big mistake when they're wanting to be seen at, the big hard person, they want to have content that connects. You're like, okay, we're doing this, but you're going to stop doing X, Y, Z, or we're not going down this path. Is there anything that comes to mind for you when I say that?
Look, I have a couple of clients and I cannot stop them from just, because for me, I'm a branding person too, right? Yeah. So I cannot stop them from just doing some really things that don't work for the business. I just got out of the shower and I'm making a coffee. I'm like, dude, no one cares. I know you want to be authentic and real, but be authentic and real with purpose. Like, don't stop doing content for content's sake. The world is noisy, and it's not a numbers game. It's a value game. And so if you're just like doing stuff for stuff's sake, you have to stop. So that's probably the biggest thing. Stop just doing content for content's sake, because actually you dilute your message.
Yeah. Because someone's told you you've got to post 5 times a day. Therefore, you're like, well, what else can I post? Oh, I know. Here's what I'm having to do. It's like, no one cares.
No one cares.
Make it relevant to us.
No one cares. Unless you're in the food industry, in which case, yes, I care.
Yeah.
But it's like, don't do content for content's sake. It's not a numbers game. It's a connection game. So that would be what I'd say. And they don't listen, by the way. Like, why are you doing that? Stop. They're like, oh, well, we like it. I'm like, I get that you like it, and that's fine. But that's probably my biggest thing.
Yeah. The funny thing is, like, I guess people might be like, oh, but I want to be authentic and real. And how do I do that? And it's like, you can still share so much and it still be relevant and it still have a purpose. And so you can be that authentic person. And still, when you're sharing stuff, there's a link that's tying it back to your core messaging or your pillars without it feeling like business content. And it's like, I don't know what you need to do to break down those walls between them, or if you've got any tips around that, because I guess I find it easy to do. I don't know if it's because I've been in the, that world for a while, but I'm like, every time I'm posting, I'm thinking like, who am I talking to? Why am I sharing this? What's the point around it? And, sometimes I'm sharing something personal, or it's a story, or I'm out for a run, but there's always a reason that I'm linking back to my business of why I'm posting it. That's kind of woven in there somewhere. Now, that might make sense to some people, but others might be like, I don't get it. How do you do that? So do you have any tips around how you actually do that?
Well, I love that. That's the same thing. Like, what's the intention of this? Like, why are you doing this? Like, everything has intention. The energy that you give it will be the energy that you put out into the world. That's the woo part, right? So unless it has intention and you're bringing energy to it, it's just more stuff. And the world doesn't need any more stuff, right? There's so much stuff out there. So it has to be stuff with intention. It has to be meaningful. And if you want to attract people who are your human, they're the people who will see value in the meaningful stuff. It's not just stuff anymore. And I think that's like a piece. What is it that you want people to do when they see this? How do you want them to feel? What do you want this to mean for them? And if it's just entertaining, then that's cool too. It can just be entertaining. I was like, I want them to know who I am, but what is the intention? And and how do you want them to feel when they connect with you, I think, is the other question.
I love that. I love it because there was something I was noticing yesterday and mentioned to my husband. I was like, why do people create some negative content, like some negative, I'm having a whinge content? I'm like, I get that you might have that perspective, but have you got any thought about the vibe and energy you're putting out into the world? Because I don't even want to look at it. Like, I can see straight away you're about to have a massive big whinge about something that's unimportant. And, I'm not saying never have a whinge or never share your opinions, but I was like, wow, the energy behind that to me was so off-putting. I didn't even want to look at it. Yeah. So I love that you've just said, how do you want someone to feel when you put that out there? Like, you can still have an opinion and share that perspective without it coming across so negatively and with a great big downer. Like, we've got enough. The media, like the news, is enough of a downer for me. I'm like, I don't turn that on very rarely, but
and I think that's when the ego comes in. So when we do that, that's ego, right? That's head. There's no big-heartedness happening when we're doing those. Not that I do them, but those people who are sharing that or having a rant, a warning rant post, they're people who need to be right. They're people who their ego is letting them lead. And, that's going to be right for that person in that time, and maybe for the people who like to sit in that. And so that's that piece about we get to be the energy that we want to attract. And so I don't want that in my life, so I'm certainly not going to project it. And we cannot attract that which we negate. So if we aspire to be remote, then when you see Martiene being remote, you're like, oh, can you believe she's just climbing a bunch of or whatever else. You can't attract that which you negate. If you want love in your life and you see people canoodling and you're like, just get a room. Like, you can't attract love if that's how you're feeling about it.
Yeah.
And it's the same with like how we put content out to the world. If you want to be seen as a thought leader and an influencer and someone's positioning themselves, you cannot attract that if you're negating something. So I think that's an important piece too.
Oh, amazing. Oh, so much wisdom and knowledge and value that you've shared there. So thank you. Now, if anyone listening would love to connect with you, follow you and learn more about your version of branding and all of this amazing way that you put brand content connection together, where can they find you? How can they connect to you?
On the Instagrams. So I think the easiest way to find me is Martiene van Steyn on Instagram or martiene.com.au on the website. So I think they're probably the two easiest places. But I'm in there all the time. I love connection. I have to be super careful that I don't go into the social media wormhole, so I give myself rations. But yeah, I'm always in there. So go ahead and connect there.
Amazing. Thank you. And I'll link those up in the show notes as well, so you can just dive straight in there and head over and find Martiene on Instagram or on her website as well if you want to learn a bit more about the business. And maybe are we seeing some travel pics on your Instagram? I haven't had a look in the last few days, so I can't wait to see.
You should have a look in the last few days, because the last few days we went sand dune buggying and it was extraordinary. So
yeah, I will. And yeah, I'm just going to live it through you with your exotic locations for the next little while. But Machu Picchu sounds incredible. So I can't wait to see those photos as well. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I love it.
Do you know what the #1 challenge reported by the women joining my Facebook community, My Tribe, said that they were struggling with their marketing in 2021, and in fact even in 2020 as well? And that was exactly how they should reach their ideal client. How do they even get in front of them in order to build their audience in the first place? That was it. And it wasn't a pick and mix. I didn't give them that answer. It was a free text question. So they could write in there anything they wanted at all. And the number of times that I saw somebody say, how to create awareness, how to get in front of my ideal client and build my audience. So many people just challenged by it. And why is that when there's such an abundance of ways that we can get in front of the ideal client? And I think it's probably that is exactly it. It's so overwhelming, isn't it? What should you do? What should you choose? What are the best ways? Whatever it is that you're doing right now might not be working. And I think it's a great time to sit back, reflect, and figure out what's the right way for you to do it. What are the ways that you're going to reach your prospective clients in 2022? So if that sounds like you, if that might have been what you wrote down in the questions on what is your biggest challenge with your marketing currently, then you're going to absolutely love the new freebie that I've just put together for you. It's called 12 Brilliant Ways to Reach Your Ideal Client. And in it, I share with you the 12, in my view, 12 top ways that you could use in your marketing plan this year to reach a bigger, broader audience in order to attract those ideal clients in to your inner circle, into your, really well-defined audience and become real leads for you. So if you'd like to get your hands on this brand new freebie, then all you need to do is go to jessicaosborne.com/12 ways. So it's 12 ways. Very easy. You can download it there, and this is a little bit of great resource for your planning, for the planning of the new year. See what you're going to change up. What is it that you maybe haven't been doing that you could be doing? And what are those things that you've been doing and they're not very effective, and maybe you're going to drop them out of your plan this year? So please head over, grab the freebie. If you want the link, it's in the show notes. And let's get you moving on up, having more success with your marketing in 2022.